Hello, and welcome back to the Godly Playroom. My name is Ruth Lomax, and it is my privilege and delight, not to mention it's kind of fun and cool, to be in this Godly Playroom, although it would be much more fun if you were joining me in person. But for now, this will have to do. We are in that season of Epiphany, which means those insightful moments or things that are about to be revealed, those sudden moments when everything becomes so clear. I wonder what moments of sudden clarity or light bulb you've experienced recently. It's been hard to imagine that we're in a season of light with all the snow and the dark, but slowly, the days are getting longer, and we look forward to that time when we are able to be outside. February is also Black History Month, and that's a time for us to think about different cultures and different peoples here in our country called Canada, as well as around the world. And sometimes when we look at difference, we think, those things happened somewhere else. But they, in fact, have happened here in Canada, where we have not treated each other well. And hopefully in this time of isolation where we need to connect more directly, more graciously, we are learning just how important everyone is, not just some of us. But amidst all those things, it might be difficult to catch our breath or to just settle down and feel at peace for a moment. So many things have changed. And some of us change well. We adapt readily and quickly. Sometimes that's because we maybe have a little control, or we have a say over what's happening, or we're excited about the change that's happening. But sometimes it catches us off guard and we just feel out of control. And so we might dig in our heels for the way things used to be or have always been done. Today's story, which is told in a godly play way and used with the author's permission, is a story about a time in the disciples' lives where everything seemed to be at risk. And yet they were following this most amazing person who said and did such wonderful things. And everything was changing. And they weren't always sure it was for the better. I wonder what you need today to be ready to hear this story. I wonder where you will find your way into it, or what part of this story might be especially for you today. So let's take a couple of deep breaths. Maybe one more. Oh, that felt so good. Let's do another one. And you might settle into someplace comfy in your home. I've got my warm fuzzy slippers on and my nice warm sweater, because this room isn't always ready and warm anymore. But it is ready and waiting. And then you also might like to light a candle. Sometimes we do that at the beginning of worship, or at the beginning of our gatherings, whether they're meetings or family events. We have all kinds of different reasons for lighting candles. But in this room, and in the Christian tradition. We do it often as a reminder of God's presence. And some of you might even know the words that we say when we light the candle in this room. We say something like, once there was someone who said such amazing things and did such wonderful things that people began to follow him. And the more they followed him, the more they wondered who he was. And so one time they just had to ask, who are you? And one time when they asked him that question, he said, I'm the light. So I'm going to put the light back on the shelf here so that it's out of the way when we tell this story. And you can do what you need to get settled in. You might even like to pause the video and go find what you might want for feast or for your response materials. But you could do that later too. We have all the time that we need. So, you'll find this story on the Sacred Story shelf for the Newer Testament, which is kind of on your way in or on your way out of the room, near the pillows. How's that? It's a story that happens about Sea of Galilee. Well, obviously, this isn't the whole Sea of Galilee. We couldn't fit that much water in our room. Although sometimes it sounds like there's that much water running down through the catchment basin in a parking lot right beside us. But so many important things happen either on the shores or on the waters of the Sea of Galilee that we need a little bit of it here to help us with this story. Once, there was someone who said and did such amazing things that people began to follow him. And when he came close to the Sea of Galilee, they followed him there. And wherever he came close to people, lives changed. One day there were so many people that his friends got a boat, and they pushed it just a little ways offshore so that he could sit in the boat and teach the crowds. He taught all day, and at the end of the day, he was very tired. But he said to his friends, "Let's go across to the other side." And so Peter and James and John and Matthew, who is sometimes called Levi, and Andrew, got into the boat with him, and they set sail for the other side. But the man was so tired, he went to sleep. And not long after, a storm came up. And the wind began to blow. And the waves began to beat against the boat. And the water was spilling over the sides and filling up the boat. And still the man slept on. And his friends began to be very worried. And they woke him up and they said, "How could you sleep? The wind is about to drown us. Don't you care?" And the man woke up. And he said to the wind, peace. And he said to the waves, peace. And the wind and the waves stopped blowing. And everything was peaceful and calm and still. And the man said to his friends, why were you afraid? But they said to one another, who is this, who even the wind and the waves obey him? I wonder what happened next. I wonder if they made it safely to the other side. I wonder what those friends will tell people when they come ashore. I wonder if you've ever been out in a boat in rough weather. I wonder if you've ever been afraid. Or what helps you when you are afraid. I hope there is someone to whom you can go. Someone that is safe for you to talk with or to be with. Sometimes we just need a light or something to cuddle. I wonder how the water felt when it was all churned up. Ugh. I wonder if you've been out when the wind blew so strongly that the trees bend and the waves slap against the shore. I wonder what you liked best about this story. And you know you can pause the video at any time, right? If you want to have more time to think or to wonder about some of these questions. Maybe you're fortunate enough to have other people watching with you and you want to have some conversation. You might come up with some of your own wondering questions that take you off in all different directions. I wonder what the most important part of this story is. I wonder if there's any part of this story we could leave out and still have all the story that we need. I wonder where you are in this story. Or what part of this story is especially for you today? It's one of the amazing things about stories is that where we find ourselves today might be quite different than when we hear the story next week or next year, or even when we're grown up versus when we're a child. I'm going to start to put the story away. And there was the boat. I grew up around small boats, canoes and things, where it would never be safe to stand up, but where they were designed to take fairly big weather, at least by a lake's standards. Very different than the ocean-going kinds of boats that there are. I wonder how many different boats you could come up with. So there was Andrew and Matthew, who's sometimes called Levi, and John and Peter and James, and that most amazing man. And this little bit of the Sea of Galilee. Looks kind of a stormy color. It's a different sea than the one we sometimes see with that lovely green shoreline. The Sea of Galilee is actually below sea level, if that makes sense. And it's in a valley with hills all the way around it. And so when the wind blows, it can sometimes come hurling down those valleys, just like in a wind tunnel, and it comes up very quickly and very suddenly. You can take tourists, sightseeing, that's the word, boat trips on the Sea of Galilee. At least you could before we were into the public health restrictions. And people who have taken that boat ride tell me they've had many a wild and wet ride, as the wind comes and then goes quite quickly. People who live along that southeastern shore of Pigeon Lake also talk about how the waves and the wind can come up so quickly. Always a good idea to keep an eye on the weather if you're going to go out in a boat, and to check the weather forecast before you go. I wonder if you'd like to start a storm with me. Maybe we could do that. Maybe this will be our response time. Or you could pause the video and go see what you might like to work with. Maybe some paints, some watercolors, get your fingers moving around. So this storm starts very softly. You can just hear that wind rustling a little bit in the tree leaves, if there were any leaves. And then the rain starts to come. And it's slow at first. And then it starts to get a little faster, and there's more and more, and then pretty soon it's like that, and then you can hear the thunder and the lightning cracking, and it's louder and louder and louder, and then it starts to fade. I wonder what storms you might be living through right now. let's take some time in prayer together. You might like to stop the video to share your prayers with your household. You might like to speak them out loud or in silence. Whenever you're finished, simply say, Amen. And the next person knows it's their turn. Sometimes people hold hands when they pray, and that would be safe to do in your household, assuming you also are washing your hands regularly. So I'll imagine that I'm holding hands with you and with God. Loving God, thank you for being with us in those storms and difficult times of our life. Even when it feels like you're not paying attention or sound asleep, you never abandon us. Help us to trust in your presence. Help us to know that we're not alone. That we can ask for help. Amen. Thank you for praying with me and for me. It makes a difference to know you're there. I don't have much of a feast today, but I do have a little. I have a glass of water and a little bit of crackers. So, it's good to know that water can be our friend, even if sometimes it is a little bit scary. I wonder what you're doing to keep warm these days. Or if you're already so tired of winter, you're just ready for it to be spring. Valentine's Day is coming up. I wonder what kind of Valentine God might give us, or that we might give God. I think one of the ways we give God Valentines is to look after each other. To be careful. To make sure we wash our hands and wear our mask when we're out in public and keep our distance. But that's just the beginning, right? Because there's all those people that we normally would see if we were out and about that we aren't able to see, and we need to let them know they're not alone. I think some people are feeling very lonely. Maybe we could do some mystery Valentines. I'm sure you can think of all kinds of interesting ways. To let other people know they're cared about. And before we know it, our time together is finishing up. So I'll invite you to take a deep breath and to just sit with some gratitude for our time together, for that little bit of peace that comes whenever we take a deep breath and remember the people that love us. And that the light of God shines, even when we can't see it anymore. So watch what happens when I change the light. So that now, while it's just in this one place and time, it could be so much more. See it? And it spreads out. Oh my goodness, there's a lot of light in this room. And it will get thinner and thinner until we can't see it anymore. But just because we can't see it doesn't mean it isn't there. So until next time, God bless. Be safe. Be well. And look after one another.